shut that damn mutt up before I lose my mind." The old man's voice cracked through the humid morning like a snapped branch. Windows rattled. Somewhere down the street, a curtain twitched, but the dog kept barking. It wasn't a bark of anger. It wasn't playful either. It was hoarse, frantic, and deliberate, like something in its small body was tearing itself apart every time it cried out. The dog had been there for 2 days straight, parked beside a rusted fence at the edge of a weedy construction lot. Tail stiff, paws dusty, ribs visible beneath its matted coat. No collar, no tag, but something in its eyes, wide, dark, unblinking, made it impossible to look away. And yet everyone did. Everyone except Mara. She wasn't from the neighborhood. Not really. Her aunt had died last week, the last blood tie left after years of funerals, and Mara had arrived to clear out the house, sell it, and get back to the gray silence of her apartment in the city. She hadn't expected the rooms to smell like lavender powder and burnt bread. She hadn't expected the rain to fall so quietly on that side of town, and she hadn't expected the dog. She first noticed it the morning after the storm, barking at nothing, nose pressed through the crooked fence, whole body shaking like it was trying to will someone into hearing. She crossed the street with a bag of stale bread and whispered something soft, but the dog backed away without breaking its bark, still staring at something just beyond the fence. It was the lot, no machinery, no workers, just tall, yellowed grass and forgotten scaffolding. A locked gate with a "Coming Soon" retail unit sign, its corners curled and sun-bleached, but behind that, Mara noticed a break in the earth, a shallow dip, like the ground had once caved in and no one bothered to fill it. She narrowed her eyes. There was something off about it, something almost careful. The next day the dog was there again, and the next dog. By the fourth morning Mara couldn't ignore it. The cries were no longer just background noise. They got under her skin, under her ribs. It was grief, whatever the dog was calling to. It was calling with loss. She took an apple from the kitchen counter and crossed the street again, this time walking around the fence toward the rear of the lot. The sun had just broken the clouds, lighting up the overgrowth in silvery gold. The air was thick, but still. She could hear the dog's claws tapping nervously behind her as it followed, pausing every few steps, checking to make sure she saw what it was trying to show. The broken back fence, someone had pulled it loose just enough to slip through, not recently. The wood was splintered, the nails rusted, as if even time had forgotten about this place. Mara hesitated, then stepped in. She hadn't meant to kneel, she hadn't meant to touch the ground, but something about the soil felt hollow. It wasn't fresh, it wasn't new, but it was wrong. The dog had stopped barking. It just stood beside her, silent now, eyes fixed on that same small slope of earth, its head tilted slightly, ears flicking with the breeze. Then it did something strange. It sat, no tail wag, no movement, just quiet. Mara's chest tightened. She pulled her phone out and opened the flashlight app. The beam danced across dead grass and clumps of dry mud, and then something caught the light, half buried, faint, a patch of faded fabric, barely the size of her palm, trapped beneath a root. Blue cotton, a child's sleeve. Her breath caught. She reached out, fingers trembling, and pulled gently. The fabric gave way with a soft tear, revealing something darker beneath, dirt packed around the outline of something solid. She staggered back. The dog stood and barked once. That single sound echoed through the silence, like a shot. By the time the authorities arrived, the sun was high and the street was crowded. Word had spread faster than Mara expected, voices murmuring, a few people crying, others pale and still. Crime scene tape, a coroner's van. She sat on the curb, the dog curled beside her, head in her lap like it had finally found the one person willing to listen. The officer kneeled down. "We need your name," he said gently. "You, the one who found it." Mara nodded slowly, still staring at the lot. "I didn't," she whispered. "He did." The officer glanced at the mutt, brow furrowed. "They say this area used to be a park," he murmured, almost to himself, "before the permits changed. Before the old church was torn down. We'll have to check old records, see if there were any reports." Mara said nothing, but deep in her bones, she knew this wasn't the first time that dog had waited. It had known exactly where to stand, exactly what to remember, and somehow, even though no one had listened, even though it had been ignored for days, it had not left, not until someone followed. And even now, as officers combed the ground and neighbors whispered about things buried too long, the dog watched with eyes full of something older than sadness, as if this wasn't the end of a story at all, just the beginning. The dog hadn't moved all night. Even as the crime scene lights faded and the street emptied, it stayed curled beside the fence, head resting on its paws, eyes open and fixed on the disturbed patch of earth. Mara couldn't sleep. She kept checking the window, half expecting it to vanish like the entire day had been a fever dream. But every time she looked, it was still there, like a sentinel guarding something sacred. Not food, not territory. Memory. The morning sun was harsh to bright for a day that carried the weight of a grave. Mara made black coffee and stood barefoot in the kitchen. Listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the ticking wall clock that hadn't worked since she arrived, she wondered who the child had been, how long they had been buried, and who had put them there. The officers had said nothing definitive, just that the burial was deliberate and dated, as if that made it easier. Around 9, a knock came at the door, 3 firm taps, no hesitation. Mara opened it to find Officer Rafiq, notepad in hand, a subtle edge of sympathy dulling his usual stiffness. He was younger than he looked, with a calm voice and a gaze that held on to things too long. "Miss Salam," he said, "mind if we talk?" Mara nodded and stepped aside, watching as he scanned the living room, not for comfort, for clues. He sat at the edge of the couch, notebook unopened. "We've been going through the old zoning files," he began. "Turns out the lot was part of a parish complex. Records say it had a community garden and a small memorial field in the back, maintained by the orphanage that stood there until 1983. Mara's breath caught. "I didn't know there was an orphanage. Most people don't. It burned down." Rafiq's voice softened. "A fire in the East Wing. 2 children missing. 1 confirmed fatality. 1 presumed escaped, though no formal ID was ever made." She blinked, slowly. "So you think?" "We don't know yet." He paused. "But the coroner says the body found yesterday was a child, around 8 to 10, likely female. Fabric on the sleeve was consistent with orphanage-issued uniforms from that time. So yes, it's possible. Maybe even likely." Mara's heart twisted, but not just from grief. There was something else, a name pulling at the edge of memory, a scent, a whisper. She had been 5 the year the fire happened. Her aunt had kept clippings of everything, old newspaper articles, letters from the parish. She remembered one in particular, a yellowed scrap with the headline "Unclaimed Aftermath, Where Are the Missing?" There had been a photo of a group of children, blurred but still haunting. One of them had worn a blue cotton sleeve, the same fabric she had touched yesterday. Her stomach turned. After Rafiq left, Mara opened the attic. The stairs groaned in protest. Dust motes danced in the sunlight as she pulled open one of her aunt's old trunks. Inside, brittle albums, rosary beads, a child's broken hairbrush, and at the very bottom the stack of articles, some folded neatly, others carelessly shoved between journals. She flipped through until her fingers froze. A photo, the same one, a group of children standing outside the orphanage, and in the lower corner, a small girl with wide, solemn eyes. The print had faded, but Mara's heart knew the shape of that face, knew it in a way she couldn't explain. She turned the photo over, faint pencil, Mena, before they sent her back. Mara sat still for a long time. That afternoon, the dog returned to the edge of the lot, no barking, just watching. Mara joined him, kneeling at the gate. "Was it her?" she whispered. "Was it Mena?" The dog shifted slightly, ears tilting toward her voice, and then something changed. A low whine escaped its throat, and it moved, not toward the grave, but around it, limping toward the far corner of the lot, past the broken scaffold and the collapsed wooden crate. Mara followed slowly, heart pounding. There was another dip, in the soil, shallower, smaller. She crouched, brushing away leaves. Something glinted, not metal, glass, a button shaped like a star. She picked it up. Beneath it was a brittle piece of paper, almost dissolved by time and weather. Only one corner remained legible. "I didn't want to leave her, but I had to run." Her vision blurred. The twist hit her like cold water. There wasn't just one grave. Someone had survived, and someone had buried the other. The dog let out a long, shuddering exhale and lay down. Mara sank to the ground beside it, head spinning. She was no longer sure if this was about justice or memory or both, but now she understood something deeper. The dog hadn't been calling out for help. It had been mourning. For years, waiting for the world to remember what it had chosen to forget. Mara hadn't slept. The events of the previous day ran in loops behind her eyes. The torn fabric, the child's sleeve, the shallow dip in the earth. And the dog. Always the dog. It hadn't barked since the moment they uncovered what was beneath the soil. It hadn't needed to. Its silence now was more unsettling than the noise ever had been, as if it had passed on the weight of knowing to her and was finally free of it. She sat by the window of her late aunt's house, staring across the street, at the vacant lot, now cordoned off by yellow police tape fluttering in the early wind. 2 officers remained posted at the gate, their postures stiff, their faces unreadable. The lot looked smaller now, as if the discovery had collapsed the space inward. What once was just weeds and dust had become something else entirely, a wound. Still open. She watched as a black SUV pulled up slowly and parked. A woman stepped out, late 40s, hard posture, eyes hidden behind wide sunglasses. She moved with a kind of caution Mara recognized immediately. The quiet dread of someone who might already know the truth but still clings to the last few seconds before it becomes real. Mara didn't realize she had stood up until her hand was on the front door. Down on the street, the dog had risen again, sitting just inside the fence, watching. The woman was met by one of the detectives, and Mara couldn't hear what was said, but she could see the moment it happened. The way the woman's hand flew to her mouth. The way her knees almost gave out. The way she didn't cry. Just stood there, frozen, as if any sound would break something too fragile to fix. Mara turned away. She didn't want to be a voyeur too. Grief. She went to the kitchen, poured water, and stared into it like it might offer an answer. But it didn't, and neither did the officer who knocked on her door 2 hours later, asking her to come down to the station for a few questions. Standard procedure, he'd said. Nothing to worry about. But the moment Mara walked into the cramped, fluorescent-lit room, she felt it, a shift in tone, an invisible tension crawling along the walls. Detective Harlow, same one from yesterday, gestured for her to sit. "Thanks for coming in again," he said. "We just wanted to clarify a few things." Mara nodded cautiously. "I already gave my statement." "You did, and it was helpful, but there's something we missed." He slid a folder across the table. "Do you recognize this?" Inside was a photo, a grainy one taken from what looked like a yearbook or newspaper clipping. A child with dark curls and bright eyes, grinning without front teeth. Mara blinked. "No," she said, softly. "Who is it?" "That's Ava Monroe, 8 years old. Reported missing 12 years ago." He paused, studying her face. "Her disappearance was never solved. She lived just 3 blocks from your aunt's house, same neighborhood, same school district." Mara felt a hollow pang in her stomach. But how could no one have found her all this time? Harlow tapped the table lightly. "Their construction lot used to be church grounds. It was closed, demolished, rezoned, the permits stalled, and the land just sat there, untouched. People forgot, but someone remembered." He leaned forward. "That dog you found. We scanned it, no microchip, but it's got an old collar scar, years old. That dog wasn't just a stray, it belonged to someone. Maybe even her." Mara swallowed hard, her throat dry. "You think the dog stayed all these years?" Harlow didn't answer right away. His gaze was calm but unreadable. "We found claw marks near the grave. Deep ones. Repeated in the same area, like something was trying to dig." She closed her eyes. That bark, that desperation, it wasn't recent, it was practice, routine, a ritual born from memory. Then something else slipped out of the folder, another photograph, faded and scratched. It showed a little girl standing beside a small German Shepherd puppy, both smiling under the shadow of a backyard tree. Mara felt her stomach twist. It was the same dog, younger, but unmistakable. The markings, the gaze. Only now she understood why its eyes held something older than time. It had watched joy decay into loss, and then waited until someone, anyone, was willing to listen. "We don't know who buried her," Harlow said quietly. "But we're reopening the case. The dog may be our only witness." Later that night, Mara sat outside on the front steps, arms wrapped around her knees, as the street lay empty in the glow of the streetlights. The dog sat beside her, head resting near her foot, tail curled around its body like it finally belonged. Somewhere. The wind rustled softly. The construction lot was quiet now, marked and guarded, no longer forgotten. She reached down and brushed her fingers through the dog's fur. It didn't flinch, didn't move, just stared ahead like it was, still watching for someone. And then, deep in the stillness of night, the dog stood and began to walk, not aimlessly, not like a stray. It walked with purpose. Past the lot, past the streetlight, down the block, and paused, looking back, waiting. Waiting. Mara rose slowly and followed. The police tape was gone by morning, but something heavier remained, a hush over the neighborhood. The kind that settles not from silence, but from collective knowing. News vans had come and gone. Children were told not to play near the lot. Someone left a plastic angel by the broken fence, its wings already stained with dust. But the dog stayed. Mara hadn't meant to go back. She told herself the first time was enough that she'd done her part. That whatever was hidden beneath that earth was now seen, documented, given its dignity. But something about the way the dog sat at the edge of the field, just past the police markers, unmoved, eyes locked on the hollow ground, it clawed at her chest. It wasn't waiting for justice. It wasn't waiting for thanks. It was waiting for something else. She stood behind her aunt's front gate, holding a steaming mug she'd barely sipped from, staring across the road as the dog shifted its weight and stared back. A wind blew through the street. Dry leaves scattered. Her fingers tightened around the mug, and then she crossed. The dog stood the moment her shoes touched the gravel. It didn't bark, it didn't wag. It simply turned and walked along the perimeter of the lot, not toward the center, where the grave had been uncovered, but deeper, toward the back fence where tangled vines crept up the crumbling brick of an old tool shed. Mara hesitated. The air felt thicker back here. The weeds grew higher. The shadows clung longer, but the dog waited, glancing back once, as if to say now. She followed. The shed door had been rusted shut before. Now it hung slightly ajar. Something, or someone, had opened it recently. Her foot brushed against a pile of broken slats. Inside, dust hung in the air like memory. The dog stopped at the threshold. Mara stepped in. It wasn't much. A dirt floor, rotted shelves, the faint smell of mildew and something sweet beneath it. She scanned the space slowly. Then she saw it, a set of small dark handprints on the back wall, smeared low, like a child had once pressed their palms there in panic or pleading. Her throat closed. The prints weren't new, but someone had tried to scrub them once and failed. She reached out to touch one, fingers trembling, when she heard a sound behind her, not the dog. A breath she spun, nothing but the air felt occupied. That night, she pulled the files from her aunt's old cedar chest. Legal papers, property documents, yellowing photographs tucked between brittle envelopes. Her hands moved faster than her thoughts, flipping, sorting, peeling back layers of a life she barely remembered. And then she found it, a letter, dated 1987, addressed to her aunt. The handwriting was jagged, rushed, a mother's hand. Perhaps it spoke of a missing girl. Said her name was Lisbeth. Said she'd last been seen playing by the churchyard, what was now the overgrown lot. That said no one believed her. That police had closed the case, said the child had run away. But the mother insisted she'd heard barking that night. Constant, relentless. No one checked. No one listened. Mara dropped the letter. She suddenly remembered. Being 8 years old, visiting that same house during a winter holiday, her aunt had snapped at her not to cross the street. "Don't play near the fence," she'd said. "Bad things settle in that dirt." At the time, Mara thought it was superstition, but now she closed her eyes. The next morning, she returned to the lot. The dog met her halfway. This time, led her not to the shed, not to the hollow where the body had been found, but along the western fence. A place she hadn't noticed before was denser here. Thorns snagged her jeans. The earth sloped downward unnaturally, as if the ground had once been broken and then hastily patched. The dog stopped, sat, and waited. She looked down. There was something odd about the way the dirt was disturbed. Not fresh, not new, but wrong, uneven. She sank to her knees, brushed away the topsoil, and found wood. Old. Warped. She paused, looked up at the dog. And for the first time, it whined. Not a cry, not a demand, but sorrow. The kind that knew what came next. Within the hour, Mara had the authorities back. This time, she didn't watch from the curb. She stood beside the dog as they unearthed what was beneath. Not another body, not this time, but a box, a small wooden chest. Inside, a handful of child's toys, a lock of hair tied with blue ribbon, and a photograph curled at the edges. A girl, no older than 6, standing beside a large dog with a crooked ear and a scar beneath its left eye. Mara glanced down. The mutt sat quietly, eyes on the box, her breath caught. Same ear, same scar, but that photo was decades old. She crouched slowly, heart thudding in her ears, and touched the dog's face with gentle fingers. It didn't flinch, it leaned in. "How long have you been remembering?" she whispered. The dog blinked once and looked back toward the shed, as if there was still more to be shown, still more to be remembered. The rain began as a whisper, barely tracing the leaves above the lot where everything had unraveled. By now, the story had made its way across local news, into headlines that buzzed with words like mystery dog, unmarked grave, forgotten case reopened. But Mara had stopped reading. She didn't need to. The truth wasn't in the reports, it was in the quiet moments, the empty spaces that the dog still visited, the hollow shed, the place where toys had been buried, the stretch of earth that had held memory like breath held underwater. Authorities confirmed it later. The child had been Lisbeth Ainsley, missing since 1987. Her case dismissed within weeks. Her mother institutionalized a year later for refusing to stop searching, and the dog, unnamed, unclaimed, and impossibly still alive, had been hers. It didn't make sense. Not biologically. Not logically. But when they held up the photo from the box and compared it to the dog that now slept curled on Mara's rug, there wasn't a doubt left. No one had fed it for years. No one had sheltered it. And yet it had endured, circling the same patch of earth, calling through storms, leading strangers to truths buried beneath their feet. Not out of instinct, but out of something deeper. Mara sat beside the dog that evening, her hand resting on its scarred head, the fireplace casting a soft flicker on the walls. She didn't speak. There was nothing left to ask. Whatever thread had kept the dog tethered to that ground, it had been severed the moment Lisbeth was named, remembered, held with care even in death. That night the dog did not bark. It slept soundly, breath slow, body at peace for the first time in what must have felt like a lifetime. By morning, it was gone. No sign of struggle, no whimper, no mess, just the faint indentation on the rug where it had laid, and the stillness of a room that somehow felt more whole, not less. Mara didn't cry. She simply opened the front door and let the air move through the house, carrying whatever needed to be carried. Maybe the dog had wandered back to the lot, one final loop before letting go. Maybe it had known its work was done. Weeks later, the city placed a small memorial at the edge of the field, a plaque with Lisbeth's name and a bronze sculpture of a dog curled beside it. People came and left flowers. Some brought their children. Others stood quietly, unsure why it moved them so much. But Mara understood. Some grief doesn't howl, it waits, and some love, the deepest kind, refuses to forget.